Hello everyone, welcome to Java Academy. Our today topic is what is Spring Boot or what is the definition of the Spring Boot. So I can say that Spring Boot is one of the module of the Spring framework. What does it mean? So as we know, in the Spring there are many modules. Like I can say Spring Core is one module, Spring MVC is another module, Spring AOP is another module, Spring Cloud is another module, Spring Batch is another module. Same as Spring Boot is one of the module of the Spring framework. There are more than 20 module in the Spring framework. I am not going to write each and every module here, but out of that 20 module, even Spring Boot is one of the module in the Spring framework. Or we can say that Spring is the wrapper around the Spring framework. So what does it mean? There is a Spring framework. So Spring framework come into the picture first, and then on top of that, Spring Boot has come into the picture. So whatever the features available in the Spring framework, all those features by default will be available in the Spring Boot as well. And on top of that, Spring Boot has their own features. Or in very simple language, I can say that Spring Boot is a very popular Java-based framework which allow you to create completely a standalone application. And once you are going to create any application or any project in any framework, either it can be Struts or JSF or any other framework, you are responsible to create the jar or war file of that application, and you are responsible to deploy that jar or war file to some of the external server. And the server can be either application server or web server. In case of Spring Boot, all the Spring Boot application or project will come with some inbuilt server. And this server can be Tomcat, it can be JT, it can be Netty, or many more servers. And here, you no need to think how I will create my jar file, how I will create my war file, and how I will deploy that jar or war file to the server. Here, each and everything will be taken care by the Spring Boot framework, or Spring Boot will be responsible to deploy our jar and war file to the inbuilt server. If you want to deploy your jar or war file to the some external server, you can easily able to do, and there is no restriction with that. So if you want to run your application in the Spring Boot, you have to simply run as a regular Java application. So how you are running your Java application, same as you have to run your Spring Boot application as well. So this is a very simple definition of Spring Boot. Now, most of the students ask one question here: is the Spring Boot a replacement of Spring Framework? The answer is no. Spring Boot is not a replacement of Spring Framework. As I said, Spring Boot is on top of the Spring Framework. So whenever you are creating any application in the Spring Boot, internally you are going to use all the dependency or jar that will come from the Spring Framework itself. So let me write down here. Without Spring Framework, you cannot able to develop any Spring Boot project. But without Spring Boot framework, you can able to develop any project in the Spring framework. This was all about the Spring Boot definition. In the next video, we'll see the history and version of the Spring Boot framework.